Hello, everybody. We're back with
Welcome.
Beyond Illusion and Doubt. Welcome to the Thunderdome.
Hold up a little audience applause.
Yeah, audience
All one
applause.
audience. Okay.
So we're reading chapter 5, Augustine,
Yes.
and we may go ahead and read chapter 6 today in the same, but not in the same episode, so
Yeah, we
don't
can
want to affect anything.
break it up.
But yeah, it's real nice and short.
Aquinas.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So thank you, everybody. Hopefully everybody's doing well.
Yeah.
It's been quite
Staying
a
safe.
passionate time in the past couple of weeks with everybody, at least in the United States of America.
I feel like my shoulders can actually relax for the first time in 4 years.
Yeah, it's
Not that anyway. Yeah,
Yeah.
Good Lord Jesus.
But
just one more thing that's like a weight on your shoulders.
yeah.
Anyway.
Cool. So we
Dive right in.
we can just get right into it. Do you want to read his disciple or Prabhupada?
I think last time you did Prabhupada.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah, that worked. I think you're right. I couldn't remember, but now that you said that, I think I do remember that.
all right. Chapter 5. Augustine.
So
Most-
I'm reading his disciple.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, so you
Okay,
start.
I'll go ahead and just start off since he starts. Most religious scholars regard Augustine, AD 354 to 430, as the main father of the Roman Catholic Church and one of the leading formulators of Christian philosophy. He wrote, "Reincarnation is ridiculous. There is no such thing as a return to this life for the punishment of souls." Read Srila Prabhupada's response below. So the disciple begins, Augustine considered the soul to be spiritual and different from the material body, but he also believed that the soul did not exist before the body's birth. He simply supposed that the soul is the superior part of the person and the body the inferior part. He also thought that the soul attains immortality only after God creates it, only after God brings it into being. At death, Augustine said the soul goes on to live eternally.
But if the soul is created, how is it immortal? How is it eternal? How can the soul sometimes not be eternal?
Well, first of all, Augustine considered that because of Adam's fall, all men are subject to the death of the body. In addition, Augustine believed that while God destines some men to enjoy everlasting happiness after death, he destines others to undergo everlasting suffering. In other words, Augustine said that some people endure both physical death, when the soul abandons the body, and soul death, when God abandons the soul. Thus, when one is damned, he faces not only physical death, but also soul death.
Figuratively speaking, when one forgets his identity as a servant of God, he undergoes a kind of death, but actually the soul is eternal. So what Augustine calls soul death is actually forgetfulness of God. Of course, until one acquires freedom from material existence, one is spiritually dead, even though still existing in the material form. Forgetfulness of one's real identity is a kind of death, because only when one is alive to God consciousness is he actually alive. In any case, the soul is eternal and survives the annihilation of the body.
Augustine would consider that in some cases the forgetful stage is everlasting, that God eternally abandons the damned soul to eternal perdition.
This is not so, thank God.
Yeah, right?
I mean, that sounds so, grim. Our consciousness can always be revived, and that is the conviction of this Krishna consciousness movement. A man is unconscious when he is sleeping, but if you call him again and again, the sound of his name enters his ears, and he awakens. Similarly, this process of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra awakens one to spiritual consciousness.
Right.
I've never thought about it like that.
That's a pretty astute way to put it.
Then one can return to his normal spiritual life. Of course, one may be eternally abandoned in the sense that one may remain forgetful for millions of years. It may seem eternal, but actually one's spiritual consciousness can be revived at any moment by good association, by the method of hearing and chanting about Krishna. Devotional service, therefore, begins with Shravanam, hearing. Again, for anyone that's listening that is not, maybe when we say Krishna, it just refers to God. I know we've said it many times, but I just feel to reiterate it. It's just the name that we choose to call God, which means he who attracts everything.
Yeah, the all-attractive one.
The all-attractive one. So Krishna, God, Anyway. Devotional service therefore begins with Shravanam, hearing. In the beginning, especially, hearing is very important. If one hears the truth from a self-realized soul, one can awaken to spiritual life and remain spiritually alive in devotional service.
Augustine rejected the idea that the various material bodies in this world are like prisons for the punishment of sin.
The soul is essentially part and parcel of God. But in this material world, the soul is factually imprisoned in different types of bodies. In the Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 14, text 4, Krishna says, Sarva yoni shukanteya murtaya sambhavantiya tasam brahma maya mahadyonir aham bija pradapita. Translation. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. For material nature, the mother, end translation. Elsewhere in the Bhagavatam, just as a little side note, you're about to drop your thing. So when he says, I'm the seed-giving father, I take it as him referring to the actual act of implanting the consciousness within actually implanting the consciousness into the embryo. So, it's due to his potency that consciousness, which is a symptom of the soul, which is a part of him, is getting... Anyway. For material nature, the mother, different species are coming. The living entities are found in earth, water, air, and even fire. The individual souls, however, are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, who impregnates them within this material world. The living entity then comes out into the material world through the womb of some mother. It appears that the soul is coming out of matter, but the soul is not composed of matter. The soul, always part and parcel of God, simply assumes different types of bodies, according to his pious or impious activities and desires. The desires of the soul actually determine higher or lower bodies, but in any case, the soul is the same. It is therefore said that those who are advanced in spiritual consciousness see the same quality of soul in each and every body, whether it is the body of a dog or a brahmana.
Also, Srila Prabhupada, Augustine considered the soul to be created to inhabit only one particular body, which he felt was a gift from God. Augustine thus rejected reincarnation or transmigration. He wrote, "Let these Platonists stop threatening us with reincarnation as a punishment for our souls. Reincarnation is ridiculous. There is no such thing as to return to this life for the punishment of souls. If our creation, even as mortals, is due to God, how can they return to bodies which are gifts of God be punishment? In other words, if the body is a gift of God, how can it also be a punishment?"
I just find it ridiculous, to use his word. So he thinks reincarnation is ridiculous, yet the idea that a soul can be sent to hell for eternity is not ridiculous.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
Okay, whatever. All right, Srila Prabhupada. Does he think that when someone takes the body of a hog or a similar lower creature, that is not punishment? Why does one person get the body of King Indra or Lord Brahma and another the body of a pig or an insect? How does he explain the body of a pig? If the body is a gift from God, it can also be a punishment from God. When one is rewarded, he gets the body of a Brahma or an Indra, and if he is punished, he gets the body of a pig.
So the degree of punishment or suffering depends on the kind of body one has?
Yes. There are many people who are well situated, and there are others who are suffering. Suffering and enjoyment takes place according to one's body. That is explained in the Bhagavad-Gita 2.14. Matra sparshas tukanteya sitoshna sukadukada agamapayino nityas tamstatikshasva bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. End translation. A man may perceive cold very acutely, while a fish may not perceive it. So the perception is relative to the body. Thus the body is a source of suffering and enjoyment, or we may consider it as punishment and reward.
What about the human body? Is that a gift or a punishment?
It is both. In the human form of life, as in other forms, material nature punishes the living entity with so much suffering. But at the same time, you can consider human life a gift, because in the human form, we can approach God. We should think that if God has given us this body for our punishment, it is His mercy, because by undergoing His punishment willingly and practicing Krishna consciousness, we may become purified and progress towards God. Devotees think in this way. Although the body is a form of punishment, they consider it a reward, because by undergoing the punishment, they are progressing towards God realization. Even when the body is given by God for our correction, it can thus be considered a gift.
According to Augustine, the physical body precedes the spiritual. He writes, if there is a natural physical body, there is also a spiritual body. But it is not the spiritual that comes first, but the physical, and then the spiritual.
No. Every living entity has an eternal spiritual body, which exists before he takes on a material body. As we said, entering the material body is a kind of punishment. Every soul is eternally part and parcel of God. But because of some sinful activity, the living entity comes into this material world. By sinful, we've talked about this before, but it doesn't mean that while with God you did something heinous, like in the example of Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Sinful meaning you did something which accrues a reaction.
Yeah.
Whether it's good or bad. That's generally what he means when he refers to sin. It's not like in the Christian sense where it just means only evil.
Yeah.
So the sin that we originally commit is thinking that we want to be the enjoyer, we want to know what it's like. You know, I explained to Shruti the other day, like, you know, there's a part of you when you see a famous person on TV. There's a little part of you sometimes that's like, oh wow, I wonder what it would be like to be the center of attention like that.
Yeah.
That is the sin that we commit. And because Krishna resides, you know, he's omnipotent, he can understand, he has a personal relationship with everybody. And so because he loves us so much, according to, you know, our philosophy, he's able to instantly understand our desire, and he grants us our desire because of the love that he has for us.
Yeah.
So that is, anyway. Oh God, where was I? Okay. Every soul is eternally part and parcel of God, but because of some sinful activity, the living entity comes into this material world. In the Bible, it is said that due to disobedience to God, wow, what the heck, Adam and Eve lost paradise and had to come into the material world. The soul belongs to the paradise in heaven, the planets of Krishna, but somehow or other he falls within this material world and takes on a material body. According to one's activities, one is elevated or degraded as a demigod, human being, animal, or plant. In any case, the soul is always aloof from the material body. This is confirmed by the Vedic literature. Our actual spiritual life is revived when we are freed from the material contamination, or in other words, from reincarnation.
Augustine conceived of a spiritual world in which all of the souls would be in bliss and would be eternally loving and glorifying God. They would still possess freedom of will, but sin would have no power to tempt them.
Yes, sin cannot touch one who remains in contact with God. According to our desires, we associate with the modes of material nature and acquire different types of bodies. Nature, the agent of Krishna, affords us facilities by giving us a material body which is like a machine. When a son insists, "Father, please give me a bicycle," the affectionate father complies. This is similar to our relationship with Krishna, as he explains in the Bhagavad-Gita, chapter 18, 61. Ishvara sarvabhutanam hrideshe junatishthati brahmayan sarvabhutani yantrarudhani mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. The Supreme Father, Krishna, is within the core of everyone's heart. As the living entity desires, the Father supplies a body manufactured by material nature. This body is destined to suffer, but the spiritual bodies in Vaikuntha are not subject to birth, old age, disease, or even of the threefold, are not subject to birth, old age, disease, or death, or the threefold miseries. The spiritual bodies are eternal and full of knowledge and bliss.
Augustine seems to admit the transcendence and omnipresence of God, but he seems at the same time to reject his existence as the localized Paramatma, or supersoul, accompanying each individual soul. He writes, "God is not the soul of all things, but the maker of all souls."
Then how is God omnipresent? The Paramatma is described as the all-pervading supersoul, both in the Brahma Samhita and the Bhagavad-Gita. Besides the verse I have just mentioned, elsewhere in the Bhagavad-Gita, 13:23, Krishna says, Upadrastanyumanta cha bharta bhokta maheshvara paramatmeti chapyukto dehismin purushapara. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the supreme proprietor, who exists as the overseer and the permitter, and who is known as the Supersoul. The Supersoul is also present within every atom. Vishtabhyayam idam krishnam ekam shena shtito jagat. With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. Bhagavad-Gita 10:42. So God's all-pervading Paramatma feature cannot be denied.
For Augustine, the human mind and soul, he called it the reasonable soul, were one and the same.
No, they are different. The soul is placed in various bodies that have different ways of thinking and feeling and willing. Different minds. For instance, a dog's mind is not equal to that of a human being. But this is not to say that a dog does not have a soul. So the mind differs according to the body, but the soul always remains the same.
Well, because he lumped together the soul and the mind, Augustine held that the souls of animals are not the same as the eternal, reasonable souls of human beings. In this way, he could justify animal killing. He wrote, quote, "Indeed, some people try to stretch the prohibition, 'Thou shalt not kill,' to cover beasts and cattle, and make it unlawful to kill any such animal. But then why not include plants and anything rooted in and feeding on the soil? Putting this nonsense aside, we do not apply 'Thou shalt not kill' to plants, because they have no sensation, or to irrational animals that fly, swim, walk, or creep, because they are linked to us by no association or common bond. By the Creator's wise ordinance, they are meant for our use, dead or alive. It only remains for us to apply the commandment, 'Thou shalt not kill,' to man alone, oneself and others."
The Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill," without qualification. Excuse me. Of course, our Vedic philosophy does admit that one living entity serves as food for another. That is a natural law. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, those animals who have hands eat animals without hands, and the four-legged animals eat animals that cannot move, as well as vegetables. So the weak are food for the strong. One must eat an animal or a vegetable, whatever the case. One must inevitably eat some living entity. It thus becomes a question of selection. However, our Krishna consciousness philosophy does not teach us to select our food on the basis that plant life is less sensitive than animal life, or that animal life is less sensitive than human life. We consider all human beings, animals, and plants to be living entities, spirit souls. So apart from vegetarian or non-vegetarian diets, we are basically concerned with Krishna Prasadam, food offered to Krishna with love and devotion. We simply take the remnants of whatever Krishna eats. In the Bhagavad-Gita 9.26, Sri Krishna says, Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakta prayachati tadaham bhakti upahritam ashnami prayatatmana. Translation: if one offers me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, a fruit, or water, I will accept it. This is our philosophy. We are concerned with taking the remnants of Krishna's food, which we call prasadam, mercy. Since we want to act on the level of loving devotion to Krishna, we have to find out what he wants and offer him only that. We cannot offer him anything undesirable or unasked for, so meat, fish, and eggs cannot be offered to Krishna. If he desired such things, he would have said so. Instead, he clearly requests that leaves, fruits, flowers, and water be given to him. Therefore, we should understand that he will not accept meat, fish, or eggs. Vegetable grains, fruits, milk, and water are the proper food for human beings and are prescribed in this very verse by Lord Krishna himself. Whatever else we might wish to eat cannot be offered to him, since he will not accept it, and thus we cannot be acting on the level of loving devotion to Krishna if we eat such foods.
Concerning peace, Augustine writes, peace between a mortal man and his maker consists in ordered obedience, guided by faith, under God's eternal law.
Yes. Peace means coming in contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A man in ignorance thinks that he is the enjoyer of this world. But when he contacts the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller, he understands that God is the enjoyer. A servant supplies the needs of his master, and we are servants meant to supply enjoyment to God. Actually, God has no needs to fulfill. The interesting thing is, according to our philosophy, right, that statement, and we are servants meant to supply enjoyment to God, if that statement doesn't jive with you, and you think, why do I have to be a servant? That's exactly why we're in the material world. If you even have to ask that question, that's why we come here.
Yeah.
Well,
not only that, but we're all servants.
We are. I mean, you're a servant of. You're either a servant to yourself, or a servant to others, a servant to your.
But even
pet,
most people that think they're servants of
kids.
themselves, they get themselves pets if they're lonely. They want to serve a pet. They want to have a significant other that they serve. They have kids that they want to serve. They all create. They just when you put the word out there, they feel like somehow threatened or controlled by it. But yet, left to their own devices, people find a way to serve someone, something.
Yeah, you have a dog, you're following it around, scooping up its poop. You're a servant to the dog.
Yeah. But even people that serve themselves are usually serving an ideal of some kind that they decided to believe in. So it's
a societal ideal. Now you're a servant to society or some political party or whatever.
You opt for service all the time. So how can you not say that it's our natural disposition?
Yeah, of course. And perfectly following up here, actually, God has no needs to fulfill, yet he enjoys the company of his servants, who in turn enjoy his company. A servant is very happy when he receives a good master, and a master is happy to acquire a very faithful servant. This is the relationship. And I think maybe in, nowadays, see, he lived for 50 years in India when it was occupied by the British. And even when I was in India, it's very common for the wealthier families to hire someone from a less wealthy family to come in and be the cook or the nanny, or they're not slaves. They're getting paid, and there's some reciprocation. And generally, from my observance, the servants were treated very well.
Yeah.
And in turn, the servants, kind of, become part of the family. They, the same lady comes over to cook meals or to do the laundry or whatever. Yeah. She's getting paid. Some of them have been with the same family for 20, 30 years. And so I think, you could also look at another example that may be more relatable to us would be the president and Secret Service. Secret Service find it an honor, except maybe in the last 4 years, to be, the personal protective detail of the president. Wherever he goes, whatever he needs, if someone comes to kill him or put him in harm, you are going to jump in harm's way.
Yeah.
There is,
Yeah.
that's what you're there for. You consider it an honor, you're getting paid, but the payment is not why you're doing it. You're doing it because you want to do it.
Yeah.
And so, that should be the relationship that we aspire with God. And rather than just being some, he's not going to just sit there and take all this service from everybody and because he's God, he's not going to be nasty and selfish about it.
Yeah.
He is actually able to reciprocate with every single person who's rendering him service like that. He's able to have a fully personal relationship, and the more that we cultivate that relationship, the more he'll reciprocate with us and the more you'll begin to understand it.
Yeah.
But it's not something that you can necessarily explain to someone who is if you're challenging, you're doubtful, whatever. That's where the knowledge comes in. You need to look at the logic, look at the philosophy, and then only through practice will you actually start to get result.
Yeah.
Just like you're doing something in a lab, you follow the instructions, and then as you proceed through the experiment, you start to get your result. So it's easy to kind of hear briefly the philosophy and just dismiss it. But it's well, how can you dismiss something if you haven't actually heard all of the full instructions?
Yeah.
That's and it can be daunting. Wait, you mean I have to read all of these books before I can decide whether or not I want to accept it? And really, that's what the Bhagavad-Gita is for. That sums up everything. So for anyone who is interested, who wants to figure out what it's all about, the Bhagavad-Gita is
the Bhagavad-Gita
it's
as
ideal.
It is.
The Bhagavad-Gita as it is.
Because there's lots of people that translated Bhagavad-Gita for their own purposes, just like they happened with the Bible over the years. And so if you want to read the actual message, you do want to make sure you get one.
And then when you read it and you if you like what you read, then you go on, read the Srimad Bhagavatam. Man, that gets even more deep. Then you have, Chaitanya Charitamrita. I mean, there's so many Vedic books that as far as you want to pursue certain aspects of the theology and the philosophy, there's something there, which that is one thing I like reading the Bible. I enjoy it, but it's only, it's whatever's there is there.
Yeah.
So if you have more, questions and, some of those things are not, to me at least, answered in there.
Yeah.
I fully accept the teachings of Jesus. I think he's a great enlightened soul. I love him. But yet, that doesn't mean that you have to shut yourself off from also exploring, other things that are, if you're a scientist, you can't just sit there and dismiss other sources of evidence just because you if you're going to confirmation bias your way through religion or spirituality, you're never going to find it
if they do that, it's considered obstruction of justice if you hide a piece of evidence because it doesn't fit with the rest of your theory.
Yeah.
If you lose it on the way to wherever you're supposed to be, evidence lockup because you decide that one piece is going to make them, it's going to let a guilty person walk if I submit that to evidence. Or maybe the person's not guilty, which is why I would let him walk. The way people think these things through is you can't just ignore facts because it's not what you initially thought or what you currently agree with in your mind. It's not the way the world works.
And why, if you are so firm in your faith, I would say then what's the harm in reading other religion scriptures to see what you can learn? Just because you're reading it doesn't mean you have to agree with what you're reading.
Yeah.
But if you read it with an open mind, then it will make you question certain things, or maybe you will think, well, wow, I've thought this all along. This is an interesting way to think about it.
Yeah.
It at least creates a discussion in your mind.
Yeah.
Or that you can have with other people, which is why we do this.
Yeah.
It's really nice. Was it you? I'm sorry.
No, you're in the middle of the last bit here.
Oh, yeah. This is the relationship between the individual soul and God, and when this relationship is destroyed, it is said that the individual soul exists in Maya, or illusion. When the relationship is restored, the individual is situated in his spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, by which he understands that the Supreme God is the actual enjoyer and that we are his servants. God is the actual enjoyer and proprietor, as well as the Supreme Being. When we understand God's transcendental qualities, we become happy and attain peace. And that is the end of chapter 5.
Cool.
Oh.
So I think we can kind of stop this one and then move into the next one.
Okay.
We kind of had our wrap-up talk about this already. So thank you guys for listening. Don't forget to share with a friend, and see you in the next one.